we get to host here tonight. It's our inaugural CISO Roundtable, and we hope it is the first of what will become an ongoing series of events like this as we inspire more people rising into the AI and cyber communities that are so important in our country these days. This is aimed at being a high-level briefing on the AI and cybersecurity landscape, and so we're going to be going into areas of legal development and regulations and framework and opportunities for jobs and so forth that we think you're all going to find very interesting. I do want to call out a number of people who've helped make this happen. Cisco and Scott McGregor from Cisco has been a driving force in bringing opportunity in this space. Scott unfortunately couldn't be here tonight, but he did send a special announcement, which we'll deliver to you at the end of the event, effectively an award that we're going to be presenting tonight in the honor of this inaugural CISO Roundtable. I do as well want to thank our friends at FIU. This event would not be happening were it not for their forward involvement in this space, making this space literally available. And now we can formally begin, since Brian Whistler is Yes. Okay. So in addition to the food and drink being here, I want you to know the men's restrooms are right outside the door. The ladies' restrooms are on the opposite side of the building. So when you hit the elevators, ladies, go to your left and then take a right, and they're down at the end of the hall there. Olivia is going to be our timekeeper. We're trying to create different kinds of rhetorical experience here. So we're beginning with some very short keynote presentations from world-class executives that are helping to lead the key initiatives, a number of key initiatives in the AI and cybersecurity space. And then we'll have a roundtable of world-class CISOs that are engaging with one another around key questions that are coming not only from the floor, but that have already been submitted to us and that will be submitted to us online. In addition to this intimate group, we have hundreds, and we expect through recorded viewings, thousands of people who will be watching this discussion. So we're very encouraged to welcome all of you who are watching online, and we apologize that you will not be able to get a Baker McKenzie ball, much less a Baker McKenzie ball signed by Brian Whistler. So with no further ado, I want to introduce Carlos Becerra. He is the Associate VP of FIU.
Carlos will join us
In a second?
to wrap up.
Okay.
He'll actually do closing remarks.
Okay, so I am instead going to pass then to Brian Fonseca from FIU to give the opening keynote. I just want to highlight that our host here is FIU, in particular the Jack D. Gordon Institute for Public Policy. And Brian is helping to lead that organization. We've been incredibly impressed by the way that they're operating in this landscape as real change makers. So please welcome Brian Fonseca.
Everybody doing good? All right, so there's no such thing as a keynote address for academics. We're programmed to speak for an hour and 15 minutes. Podium, we're naturally fit for. So if you're ready, I'm gonna, hour and 15, is that appropriate? Yes. He told me 7 minutes or he's gonna beat me up. So I'm gonna do my best to get through this incredibly complex landscape of AI and the scene between AI, of course, and cybersecurity. So just by a show of hands, how many are in the room are in the AI space? I know we're all techies for the most part. How many AI folks in here? Okay, so you're following this incredibly closely, right? The scene between cyber and AI. I don't need to walk the majority of the audience too far back, but certainly the concept of AI has been around for a very, very, very long time. Most people don't realize how far back we go, but it takes us back to the 1950s when AI was really first scientifically sort of conceptualized and moved out into the halls of academia for application. I'm convinced that it was It was a movie in 1968, 2000, Space Odyssey, that ultimately caused a ripple effect that moved AI, back out of the classroom and purged forever because we were afraid machines like HAL were going to take over the world. And if you're too young to know what 2001 Space Odyssey is, go watch it. This is the real first conceptualization of a machine that was going to conquer the human species, right? And so that created a massive sort of dip in the evolution of the science around AI. And of course, now it's back in full force. And as we think going forward, we're talking about sort of a convergence in which AI is going to have tectonic shift in just about every vertical, by the time we get to 2035 or so, in which you're going to have AI sort of pervasive in just about everything. And we tend to talk now about sort of whether it's public sector, private sector, and certainly we have a convergence of both here, but every organization is a technology organization. Every organization, in many ways, is an AI organization, integrating AI in sophisticated ways. And so, we move from sort of nascent stages to emerging to maturing. We're now in sort of the transforming stage of where AI is just having this tectonic shift. I won't go into the different types of AI, but I did want to spend a little bit of time talking about where AI sits in the context of cyber. I had an opportunity to brief DoD recently. It's actually, I was with Southcom and I was briefing on sort of that scene between AI and cyber. It was really focused on helping improve partner nation capacity across the Western Hemisphere. So this is like U.S. DoD kind of leading the charge and helping our partner nations in Central America and the Caribbean, of course, understand sort of how AI was converging with cyber. And so I started out talking about offense and defense. That's very typical in sort of a military environment. And of course, my counterparts in the military said, well, let's not talk so much about offense, let's talk about defense, right? Because there's a lot of concerns over offensive capability, particularly as it relates to sort of unlocking the power of AI. But the reality is that, enemies, rivals are using AI in very offensive ways. And organizations like ours must understand that and then be prepared to provide an adequate defense. And so just kind of talking through some of those now. So from a defense side, some of the ways in which AI is going to impact the cyber landscape very intentionally are, and I have 6 of them laid out here that are in practice today, and I think are being scaled, quickly as we continue to embrace this technology. But you think about things like anomaly detection, on how you're leveraging machines to identify unusual network activities, right? This is one that we're seeing, play out now. Threat prediction, being able to amass massive amounts of information and determine where those threat verticals are coming from, those threat vectors are coming from. Automated responses. These are where your machines are taking taking the defense in which they're automating the process of not just sort of detection, but patching systems in real time to overcome any type of vulnerabilities in your networks. Advanced threat hunting, where we're analyzing data to find sort of hidden threats that are traditional security measures might miss. Penetration testing. Often, at the university, for example, and I suspect up here I'll have an opportunity to talk a little bit about what we do in academia to prepare the future workforce, but we were putting a huge emphasis on spinning out pen testers, right? And at some point, pen testers may not be sort of the plethora of jobs out in the market. AI is going to displace some of that. AI is going to displace not just pen testers, but coders, software engineers. And so we're really thinking meaningfully about where the career space is going and how we can put, for example, our students ahead, or put them where the puck's going, not where the puck's at, right? Help them get in front of that. But certainly pen testing is another one. And then, of course, behavioral analysis, right? So as you look at different activities going on within your organization, how do we leverage sophisticated models to be able to detect that something strange is happening with the behavior of one of your inside employees, right? So those are different ways in which we're seeing now cyber being integrated into defensive spaces. We expect that to scale quite rapidly. And so a lot of questions surrounding ethics, and I'll talk about ethics here in just a moment as I sort of conclude. But before I get there, let me talk a little bit about offense. And it's not just sort of nation states like the U.S. on offense, but you have criminal organizations, you have state-sponsored organizations, you have adversarial states all leveraging AI in offensive ways. And I'm not yet talking about AI versus AI, adversarial AI, which is also coming very quickly and terrifying people in spades. But as you think about AI on offense, Think about AI-powered machines. I remember, maybe a decade ago, I had an opportunity to have a thoughtful conversation with a very senior level Microsoft, executive, and I said, "Well, what keeps you up at night?" And she said, "I'm terrified of a worm that needs no human interaction whatsoever. They can move into a machine and they can navigate that machine entirely without anyone ever giving it any guidance." And so that's what we're going to have to face: malicious software, malware that can get in your system, evade detection, find opportune times to do what it's programmed to do. Automated phishing attacks, and those are being scaled quite rapidly. Adversarial AI attacks, we're seeing machine on machine. AI-driven social engineering, which is getting far more complex, far more sophisticated. We're seeing that, for example, in things like our elections, right? In which we are seeing already AI social engineering that's having, I think, impactful. Well, we have to measure impact, but certainly having a presence in things like our elections. And of course, automated exploit delivery. So these are just some of the ways in which offense and defense is playing out in that scene between cyber and AI. And then lastly, just because Colonel Thomas is here, and I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the importance of ethics in AI. So as we think about embracing AI, I'm a huge fan of the principles of ethical AI that the DoD has adopted, which essentially covers 5 core areas of ethical responsibility. As you start thinking about the deployment of artificial intelligence, AI must be responsible, equitable, traceable, reliable, and governable. And these are the 5 conditions in which, again, the DoD, predicates sort of its principled use of artificial intelligence across all verticals within DoD. But as we think about it in this specific space, that's where, we're sort of thinking about how we leverage ethics as we deploy them, whether it's private sector or public sector organizations. So is that 7 minutes? Is that close enough? I can go for another hour and 3 if you want me to. Otherwise, I'm excited about being here. I'm excited about a thoughtful conversation. I'm excited about the partnership that FIU is building with Fusion Cyber to continue to sort of scale education to make sure that we're meeting the workforce demands of not just today, but tomorrow. So with that, Jim, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Next up is Keith Schultz. Difficult to introduce in part because he's a leader in so many different sectors. Chief of Staff and of Counsel, boyhood friend, I think, with Robert Smith at Vista Equity, which many of you know, but also very involved in leading Student Freedom Initiative, which has been a game changer in bringing non-predatory loans into the academic space and giving opportunity for students that have not existed before. He's going to tell you a little bit more about that and his view of the landscape of opportunity. Please welcome Keith Schultz.
Good evening, everyone. We do this. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. My church, right? Good evening. As he was mentioning, my name is Keith Schultz, and I have this interesting set of relationships, and I'll sort of walk you through those so you can see how what we do fits within the context of how we increase access to talent in this space more broadly. He mentioned the fact that, yes, I am the Deputy Chief of Staff at a firm called Vista Equity Partners. Vista Equity Partners, for those who aren't as familiar, is headquartered out of Austin, Texas. It's the largest private equity firm that's never had a loss, right? That's kind of a good thing. But the important point is, in the context of Vista Equity Partners, it's all enterprise software, and we have AI embedded in all 80 or so of our portfolio companies. But as we were doing all the work that we do at Vista Equity Partners, one of the things that Robert wanted to do was make certain that while talent may be equally distributed, sometimes opportunity is not. And so as he was paying off the student loans at Morehouse College, he wanted to make certain that, yes, these types of opportunities were great for 400 students at a single institution. But what about the other 103 historically black colleges and universities, the tribal colleges, minorities? What about the rest of those students? And so as a result of that challenge that he provided to me back on the 20th of May 2019, how could we provide access to opportunities for students at all minority-serving institutions in a way that had not yet been done before? And so we created this organization called Student Freedom Initiative. And it was primarily intended to do just that, provide opportunities, but really more importantly, address the wealth gap in the process of addressing these opportunities. And so we provide resources to undergraduate students, right, such that that $1.7 trillion student debt problem that's owned by some 43 million borrowers, and there's some $35,000 that they owe, we wanted to make certain that the students that are coming in after them don't have that burden. And so we just do that. We provide an alternative to the Parent Plus loan challenge, and we do it in a way that isn't a scholarship. When Robert paid off those student loans, he wanted all these young people to pay it forward. So as they're paying it forward, they're actually providing it into a fund that provides that same benefit for students in the future. So whether you're at a school like Howard or Morehouse, or a school like Tougaloo in Tougaloo, Mississippi, as long as you're in the program, you can take advantage of that benefit. Because many of you may not be as aware, you could take a single Ivy League institution like a Brown that has an endowment of some $6.6 billion, and you can take all HBCUs combined, less than 5.5. So there's a reason why the students who are coming from those institutions tend to have more debt, because they don't have as much institutional resources, and most of them are first generation, and all of them in some way rely on some federal assistance. That's where Cisco comes in, right? Cisco, although Scott is not here, one of the areas that we wanted to make sure happened was that in addition to addressing the challenges that students have, to address the challenges that the institutions have. One of the areas that the institutions had as a problem was back in 2020, the Department of Education put out a requirement that said all college and universities who receive financial aid through your IT systems, and of course that's all of them, you have to comply with a set of the NIST requirements. Well, if 80% of the students at historically black colleges and universities rely on some form of federal aid and you took it away, most of those institutions would close, because you can't replace 80% of your revenue. And most of the HBCUs rely on students on campus, not grants, not scholarships, not subcontracts. They rely on students on campus. So while not here, I'm going to praise Scott and what the folks at Cisco did. Cisco decided to cut a check for $150 million to address the problem. And all the HBCUs, tribals, and other minority serving institutions had to do was say, I'm in. And so we're through about $100 million of that investment that Cisco made to address that cybersecurity threat across all these institutions. So that's Scott McGregor and his folks, Chuck, who is the president and CEO of Cisco, as well as the president of the Business Roundtable, for those that are familiar with the Business Roundtable, which is the largest 200 firms in the country. That's where Scott and the folks at Cisco come in. Where the folks, Chris and company come in is, part of what we do is we wanted to make certain that we addressed the issue of talent in an area that was driven by what industry wanted. So yes, we provide this benefit for STEM students, science, technology, engineering, and math, sophomores and above, and it's $40,000 for those students that fall into that category. But what we found based on those students that we were engaging with is many of them may not necessarily be STEM. They might be in any number of career areas or majors. And so we worked across the board to say, well, if there are students who are pursuing certain certifications, we could also make that benefit available. Because we recognize that this career area, whether it be AI or cyber, is one of those areas that is in high demand. And the whole approach behind what we were doing is to address this wealth gap through the lens of education. And one way to do that is to start with our college students and start making sure that they're prepared for the opportunities that come in the future. So that's kind of what we do. We were birthed out of the Morehouse Gift back in 2019. We wanted to assure that we address the wealth gap through the lens of education through minority serving institutions as well as the students who attend there. So we do it through these methods that are applied directly to students, like making sure loans effectively are available, more cost effective, making sure that for those who have come from the Southeast or Florida, where you have hurricanes, we provide micro grant assistance such that students who are experiencing these one-time emergencies because of hurricanes and other activities, we provide grant assistance there. But also, more importantly, to make certain that for those institutions who need this institutional support, we actually provide institutional support to ensure that they can address the needs of their students. So that's where we came from, what we do, and where we're going is to ensure that those students who have a desire and a need for these type of certifications, we actually leverage the 67 institutions that are now in the program, 67 institutions from one, and some 200,000 students since 2019. That's the impact. People are sort of keeping track to ensure that we can actually hit our mandate, which is to address this wealth gap through the lens of education. I stayed below my 7 minutes. And so again, if for those who need more information, we can make that information available, or make it available through the staff that's here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Keith. A lot going on in terms of the educational opportunity landscape, and SFI is a key part of that. Want to introduce next the other Brian, who's here from Baker McKenzie. Brian Hangesbaugh is the chair of Baker McKenzie's Global Data and Cyber Business Unit, and want to welcome you here to share as well, Brian. Let's give him a round of applause.
Great to be with you. So I think my remit was to talk a little bit about opportunities, what we see, maybe particularly in the legal space. And I figured I'd talk about myself a little bit because I like talking about myself, and it's always an enjoyable experience for myself. But anyway, so I began in the government actually out here in Washington, D.C. Right after law school, came here, worked for the Department of Commerce, got involved in something called the Safe Harbor privacy negotiations with Europe. Way back in the day, may it rest in peace, it was ultimately the Safe Harbor that we structured between Europe and the U.S. got struck down. Its replacement was struck down. We're now on the third data transfer vehicle between Europe and the U.S. And some people say that, you know, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. I like to say third time is a charm. I'm confident this one's going to make it. Anyway, we'll see. But I think one of the big places you can certainly go is looking into the government. Lots of opportunities in agencies, developing policy in the government, looking at doing enforcement activities, either with a regulator or even, you know, an assistant U.S. attorney like the other Brian was back in the day, et cetera. So there's lots of government opportunities. There's also, when I was done negotiating Safe Harbor and Clinton administration ended, I went into Baker McKenzie, where I'm now. I have this great swag. We got the basketballs, all kinds of stuff, good stuff. And I intended to stay at Baker McKenzie for about 2 years just to check it out and see what that was like. And I'm here 24 years later. The firm's still doing this. It's been a great run. It's been really exciting to work across a whole range of domains. And then, of course, another place to go is into a company. One thing I want to, and be legal within a company is particularly fun and exciting. One thing I want to emphasize is from a significance perspective, law is playing more of a significant role in cyber and AI than ever before. And if you were trying to do like Venn diagram of maps and things like that, you could say that there's a whole bunch of privacy laws that are out there and have been out there. We've got them kind of all over. They're spreading like wildfire even in the States. We have an emerging layer of cybersecurity laws, and these are things like the CIRCIA critical infrastructure reporting requirements, or the Securities and Exchange Commission rules about making notification in 8K if there's a materiality issue with a cyber incident that you've had. You've got New York Department of Financial Services. You've got some California regulations developing. In Europe, we've got NIS2 directive, Cybersecurity Act, and other things. And so what we're having now more than ever is a whole layer of legal obligations that go around cybersecurity. And that doesn't even get yet to that's the right of boom side before you have a big incident. Left of boom side, you have all kinds of investigation issues that you have to take care of. But what it means is that lawyers are going to be much more involved. Not good news for anybody who's like a technology person, I think. Anyway, but no, lawyers are going to be much more involved from here going forward and everything, because you have to document. Not only do you have to do the right thing in security, you have to document it in the right way so that you can make your case that, you know, you shouldn't be held responsible as a company, for example, if something goes wrong. So lawyers who can be really good, get some of these certificate trainings and all like that, and even, you know, heck, even get out and do some of that work for a few years and then go to law school, the amount of value that you would bring to your company or your law firm and its clients or in the government space is just tremendous. And really the sky is the limit. The last emerging area is AI. And to me, I feel like AI is about now, we've got Colorado AI Act, Utah, we've got, you know, and some NIST standards, we've got the EU AI Act, which, by the way, Europe always regulates first and asks questions later. So Europe is like way ahead. There's massive regulation. They did the same thing with privacy back in the day. That's just what they do. You know, they like to sit there and spin up all these rules that are just kind of left. What does this even mean? I don't know what those words mean. Anyway, so they're making it up. But what you will find is that there's a really exciting space to be in to help interpret and apply the emerging AI rules and make them make sense in the context of cyber as well as privacy. So kind of the sky's the limit. If you were looking for a place where you could be guaranteed to have a job, this is the place to be. This is gonna, you know, be with us for a long time. So.
Thank you very much, Brian. Baker McKenzie is world class. They're our counsel, but when he said lawyers are going to be much more involved, it gave me chills. Okay, well, next up is Chris Attess. And Chris is a serial entrepreneur in the tech space, leading Fusion Cyber as well as its SOC initiative. Many things that I could say about Chris because we work together, but one thing that I want to highlight is that here's a guy who's been through the build of a number of tech companies and exits, but what has driven his passion in this space is what we're doing in serving veterans and other underrepresented communities and helping to engage them in the talent pipeline crisis that we have right now in America. So please welcome Chris Attess.
Well, thank you for all being here tonight. There was an interesting summit in India this weekend, the NVIDIA summit, and the CEO of NVIDIA said two things that I think were really important. We're now in the age of the super employee or the superhuman because of AI, but that also requires cyber policy and regulation around that. The second thing he said was that Moore's Law is over. Doubling compute every 2 years is now happening every 2 months, if not faster. And so we now have a whole new technology stack that's being developed for AI. You know, we have, as we're training the next generation of Fusion Cyber talent, they're on an AI platform. We have mock career interviews using AI. We are actually testing them for their certification exam using AI. And so how do we log all of that? How do we track all of that? How do we put the human in the loop? And that's going to be your job, whether you're going into law or MBA or cyber. It's constantly thinking about what you're interacting with AI and cyber and saying, is this right? Is this the way it should be? And so I think we're, you know, I've said to a number of you in the room, I remember when I saw the first browser for the internet, Mosaic A4, back in like 1994, and just kind of had like this chill, like, wow, this is going to be incredible. I've had the same thing with AI, but it's going to be exponential. And so as you go through this journey, what we wanted to share with you tonight is the opportunities. What are these leading CISOs, Chief Information Security Officers, what are they talking about? What are they dealing with in their day-to-day space? And how can we provide that information to you? But please raise your hand. Ask questions if you're online or if you're here to learn more. So with that, I'd like to bring the CISOs up, and I'll bring you up one by introducing each of you. I'm going to start first with Jonas Hirschfield. Jonas is the CISO for Class.com, leading e-learning giant. Next, I'll bring up Brian Fonseca at the FIU Gordon Institute. Jonas. Anthony Diaz is a Board of Advisor member for Fusion Cyber and the CISO at Xtero that does risk management. Mike Grader is also a CISO advisor to the company. Day to day is CISO at Rocket Software and was formerly the Associate CISO at Northrop Grumman. Brian Hench, I'll bring you back up, sir. Thank you. Baker McKenzie. And then last but not least, I'll bring up James Van Neerden, leader at ServiceNow.
And I will be asking questions from this side of the room. We're going to be taking some questions online as well. Mike from FIU will be asking questions as well on the other side.
Wait, what?
I have a colleague,
Yeah,
Liz Roper,
Liz.
needs to be added too.
Thank you.
Liz and I agreed if there's any question I can handle, she would handle it, so she needs to sit here.
We're just gonna refer questions to
And maybe I'll say Liz was a former Manhattan DA, ran the cybersecurity shop there for how many years were you there?
I was at the office for a little over 15 years.
Yeah.
Very excited to be here.
Don't mess with her, she seems
You
nice.
You ran cyber at Gotham?
Right, all in New York City.
Wow, amazing,
Yes.
incredible.
Yes.
All right, well, let us put the first question then to this side of the table with regard to cyber litigation trends and emerging legal concerns. Given the surge in cyber litigation, which emerging legal trend do you consider most pressing for CISOs? And what role do you believe proactive compliance versus reactive defense plays in effectively managing those risks?
Okay, well, And we get an hour to answer this question, or how long do we have? It's like a few minutes. Okay, so I would say there is so much going on, right? CISOs have so much to have to look after. I mean, I think what is it? The World Economic Forum says that if cyber were an economy, it'd be the third largest economy in the world behind the U.S. and China, because it's into the trillions, you know, of money that's made from ransoms and everything. And there's this blending between nation state activity and financial crime going, where the power of the nation states are now blending in. And so if you're a CISO of a company, or certainly of, you know, the U.S. military, or, you know, sensitive assets, your job is enormous and challenging. And, you know, there's the asymmetry where the threat actor only has to be right once. You have to be right 100% of the time. But then you get all those resources on that side. So CISOs have a lot to worry about. There's all kinds of flavors of attacks that are going on every day. The one thing that just came to mind, though, because we were just on a call with another of our colleagues, and in fact, we've got a former SEC colleague here with us here today, SolarWinds. So, you know, really interesting case, SolarWinds, you know, supply chain attack, you know, their systems were compromised. It was a gateway to thousands of company systems. The Securities and Exchange Commission got very interested from a public company perspective about what's going on with notification. SEC subsequently came in and took an action against SolarWinds and named the CISO as one of the defendants. Now, Liz can also go into chapter and verse on the Uber CISO case and how that played out. But the most interesting part to me is the good news for SolarWinds was district court issued opinion, largely did not take the SEC up on a lot of the claims. But there were claims about individual responsibility that still persisted, particularly in relation to the CISO having signed off on some public security statements, which were later shown to be not true in terms of, you know, password protection and security by design in the software process. And in the meantime, with that public-facing statement going out, there were internal PowerPoints and other things saying we don't have our house in order on this. So that disconnect led to potential personal liability for the CISO. And to me, that would be the biggest thing I would be looking after if I was a CISO.
Personal liability that pierced the corporate veil?
Yes, personal liability for individually signing off on statements that were not true, fraudulent, basically, is what the claim is to the public.
So that we're not scaring off people who.
I'm sorry, we started with the lawyer. What did you want?
I mean, that threat exists for any officer of any company
True.
that is making a fraudulent claim.
True, that's true. No, that's true. These are just early beginnings of a couple things that are going. But what I also don't want to scare people off, because it's a truly important function, and, you know, one that can be done well and can be done, you know, safely without worrying about personal liability and things like that. But what I would say is the antenna should be up whenever you're involved in something where you're looking at something that's going out public and it doesn't really at all match the reality of what's going on. I think those would be the times. I don't know if you want to say a word about the Uber case.
Yeah. I mean, I just echoing or kind of building on everything Brian said. I think the thing that also occurs to me, and this kind of calls back, I think one of the points you made in your opening remarks about this not having historically been an area where there's a lot of legal oversight in an organization, right? Like your chief compliance officer has probably consistently been like engaging with legal, and that's been the case for decades. Whereas the security organization, I think it's a newer phenomenon that you have this idea of there being significant legal risk. And in SolarWinds, if you read that complaint, like one of the things you notice is, I think the SEC kind of hung its hat with regard to the personal liability of the CISO, Tim Brown, on the fact that there were all of these communications that looked terrible for him around this security statement, like engineers saying, this is all a lie, I can't believe we're saying this to the public. And inside an organization that might not feel that crazy at the time, right? These are people who like are really grappling with significant risks. But I think there has to now be sort of a reckoning of like, these are communications that are going to be like read in a deposition potentially someday. And so we need to just kind of be more thoughtful about how we're talking about risks inside the organization. And I think with Joe Sullivan, so this was the chief information officer, I guess, of Uber, who was criminally prosecuted, right, and convicted for his role in handling a data breach kind of after the fact. So on one hand, you have the SEC's action against Brown, where you kind of have a more scrutiny of like the proactive measures that were taken, like what public statements were made, what did investors think about the company's cybersecurity posture, and the SEC really taking issue with the fact that they thought those statements were misleading, leading up to what was eventually a massive cybersecurity breach. In the Uber case, what you had was a person who kind of, according to the government, covered up, right, the extent to which a breach was impacting the company and kind of treated it in a way that was misleading to a government regulator. And that's, I think, where he really got into criminal trouble, right? Was this kind of the cover up is worse than the crime, like taking steps to try to minimize the extent to which this event impacted the company and the data subjects whose information was compromised. So that's,
Good, helpful reminder that ethical underpinnings in any area of growth like these spaces.
It's why you want a good lawyer.
Cyber.
Don't be nervous about it. You want a good lawyer with you to get it right the first time. Right?
Let me move to the CISOs here.
Look, I do want to add one thing because I've read both of those cases because I'm vastly interested in them. But yeah, there's definitely differences there, right? The Uber case, I mean, it's about both of them are about transparency, right? And so my boss and my board and my CEO and I have had this conversation, right? I think for anybody who's aspiring to be in cyber, right, it is really about like just speak what the truth is, right? And if you can offer that level of transparency as you communicate, because there's a lot of uncomfortable things we discover, right? But with this desire to fix things, right? But you want to do it the right way, and you want to bring your board and bring your executives along with you when you're doing that. And so when I look at those cases, right, you start to border on, right, how transparent was, what was going on at SolarWinds at the time. Certainly, what happened with Uber, definitely wasn't transparent, right? I mean, he tried to really, make a. He tried to turn it into a bug bounty program, what was really a breach, right? And say, we were paying these guys off for finding vulnerabilities when they were, trying to extort them. So that's a big difference, right? But I think part of the point of what you guys are making is, right, these are precedents now, right? And they're going to continue to happen, right? I mean, they're going to continue to build if there's, right, similar behaviors found. And I will say that since I've become a CISO, these guys are my best friend, right? My internal counsel and my external counsels are vital to navigating because it is complex, right? But I think you get into trouble when you try to do it without partnerships with your legal teams.
Really well said.
Just one thing to add on that, because as a practicing CISO and building on what Mike just said there is, I use a term with my team, ignorance versus avoidance. And with all this AI technology out there, ignorance is becoming more aware. As we put these technologies and these AI capabilities, we are now, as CISOs, becoming more aware of what's in our environment. And I speak with my chief compliance officer every day. Like every day, we have a stand-up call to go over the state of the business. To the point of the regulation, it's hard for us in security and our GRC to keep up. So our compliance officer is constantly reading us these regulations, and those regulations drive our security programs. They drive how we shift our security programs. But the point on transparency is key too. Like as a CISO, transparency is key. Trail of evidence, transparency to your leadership team, transparency to your board. There's this native culture of like, I don't want to share bad news, but we also have a saying that, good news should travel fast, but bad news should travel faster.
Well said. So AI tools are becoming essential in both compliance and threat detection. How do you evaluate the reliability of AI and meeting stringent global reporting obligations? In other words, do you consider key limitations or trust factors when balancing automation with human oversight? Anthony, can I put that to you?
Sure, absolutely. That's a pretty wide topic, but I would say AI and specifically Gen AI, is developed off of the back of things like, in the early 90s we had heuristics and antivirus software Then that developed into things like user and entity behavior analysis. And I think now we're at the next kind of industrial revolution of Gen AI, force multiplying some of the capabilities, like in the SOC, for example, and really acting as that super powered, human. I think Chris used that earlier, but I think there's still some hallucinations we need to worry about. I work for a legal tech company, and there's certainly a reluctance to have those bet the firm, bet the company cases with Gen AI. So I think it's still early days, and I think for us, just being mindful about use cases that we can manage the risk of, whether it's helping us with policy creation or aligning with those frameworks and legislation. I think those are the easy entry points now, not putting kind of the trust the company cases on Gen AI capabilities. That's how we've managed it. And I think a lot of other organizations, large organizations, have started to create these AI boards and oversight committees to really give insight and help manage that risk. So I think those are all important.
Thank you. Brian?
Yeah, I mean, I'll add, I think that's excellent. I would also add that, the regulatory environment for AI is still very much the Wild West, right? Yeah. And there's still incredible discussion as to what goes federal, what gets pushed down to the states, and then you have a whole globe. At some point, the fact that, Europeans jumped out in front and are proactive is now coming back to bite them in the butt because of the regulatory intensity and the fact that it's undermining private sector investment. So there's some real struggles in terms of the regulatory environment. But then you sort of juxtapose that to the fact that today, the AI landscape is incredibly diffused. You're talking about a startup environment in which so many of the organizations out there that are putting these tools out there are small, medium-sized businesses. And so you haven't had that consolidation of these tools and capabilities into the hands of companies that have complex risk assessments or risk processes internally. So those two things, this regulatory Wild West and this diffusion of companies across this broad landscape, weaving AI into the marketplace is, I think, making this far more challenging for now.
Okay, I can't resist. So, because this is where it reminds me so much of privacy circa 2000, early 2000s. Because if you look at the Colorado AI Act, what it's getting into is you have to have a good governance process. And if you follow the NIST AI principles, you're going to get a safe harbor. And so that means you have to have an overall policy, governance policy. You need to have stakeholders, multi-stakeholders involved in it, looking at use cases, evaluating. The worst thing in the world for a large company is just to rely on a small enterprise that says, hey, here's a great tool, go use it. Okay, where did the data come from? What are the capabilities? What's the reliability? But if you bring that up into a governance framework with multi-stakeholders looking at it, say, is this one that are we worried about the hallucination with this one, or no, is this one so tried and true, we got a kind of other compensating control. So you needed to put it into that kind of governance framework that you're daily talking to your compliance person is fantastic, because they will help you stay on the right track for how you're evaluating and managing that risk. So you can try some things, but you have to do it in an organized, governed way.
And you point out what NIST put out earlier this year in terms of the AI management framework, which was designed to do that. But the forcing function is still fairly challenged, right? A lot of these small companies are moving straight to market. They're not moving them up into large ecosystems because every company is now pursuing AI as sort of the holy grail to exponentially grow their organizations. And so that adoption, piece is not always being done as sort of a thoughtful pathway through good governance, protocols. And again, because the regulatory environment is still very nascent, the forcing functions are this. It's a great point, but this is part of the ecosystem we're trying to develop now. Sorry. Yeah.
But this is understanding those issues is part of having the landscape view. Mike?
That's a great segue into the next one. With an increasing push for cybersecurity legislation, what role do you think CISOs should be playing in helping shape those laws?
I think there's like a real, I'm mostly interested to hear what you all have to say, but I think there's a real misapprehension a lot of the time about the role of a CISO on the part of government. Like when you see some of these enforcement actions, and I think there can be a little bit of a disconnect where, as a fairly recent government attorney myself, I can say like, there's not necessarily an awareness that, like, for example, the CISO is working with like a tiny sliver of the budget for the IT organization, right? And they're having to make very, very tough decisions. So I've seen a lot of really good advocacy recently on behalf of the CISO community. Like there was a fantastic amicus brief written in the SolarWinds matter that was signed onto by a number of CISOs. The Chamber of Commerce does a lot of good work in this regard, but interested to hear what
So would you foresee advocacy as being from the cybersecurity industry, helping lawmakers actually develop those regulations that would more accurately address those emerging risks?
I hope so.
It's got to be a multi-stakeholder environment. I mean, CISOs have a perspective that needs to inform the landscape. So do other stakeholders in the ecosystem that influence. I mean, if you want good policy, I think you need
Practitioners.
You need a combination of sort of confluences that all have equity in the outcome, that are shaping an outcome that's advantageous to the interests.
You touched on a
Sorry, Brian.
Oh, I was gonna say, you have to get CISOs in there. My God, don't let the legislators just write this stuff without, I mean, like,
Right.
it's gotta be there, cause otherwise, Lord only knows, California is spinning up some draft regs under their privacy law right now. And for cyber, and underneath it, there's just this line item, they want a zero trust architecture for processing of personal information. I'm like, do you even know what that means? Like, what the definition is very squishy, and I'm not even sure that they know what they're talking about. So absolutely need, some expert help.
I think there's a challenge though, like a lot of us, and coming from a highly regulated industry, right? We had the capability to do this, but I think a lot of CISOs don't know how to mobilize to help,
Yeah.
right? Like, so if you're a part of an ISAC, right, that's a great way to get involved, but they are heavily influential in like finance and in defense, right, and in energy, but not necessarily in other technologies, right? But absolutely, we should be a voice at the table, because there's value, and I think that like years ago, right, we were all kind of scared off of like regulatory and law being sort of like the other side of the fence and only involve them if you got breached and you needs to bring in help. But I've even seen over the past couple of years, right, even the Bureau has changed their tune on how to engage publicly, right, with us, right? And so several years ago it was like, only bring the Bureau in if, right, you need them to investigate a crime. Now it's much more of a partnership, right? And hopefully we're seeing that across, right, other parts of both the regulatory environment and law enforcement.
Liz, you mentioned on the budget, so in Florida, the Florida Government Information Systems Association this year was able to lobby and fight as a group. The state was going to reappropriate $40 million back into the state's coffers because it hadn't been utilized yet. The problem was that there was a miscommunication, there was a gap in the way that you could procure once the money's there and how long it actually takes by the time licenses come around. So that's why the money was sitting there. And had it not been for the group in Florida, and this is, I think it's close to 800 CISOs, they were able to lobby the state, keep that money on the side. So I don't know if there are any other examples like that that y'all could think of where that has been, pretty effective. That was on the budget side, saying, hey, no, we do need that money.
I hope they got to use it.
Yeah. Okay,
But
good.
what we don't know.
There's to speak about why I believe that us practicing CISOs need to be a part of this. I don't want to mention one of the state frameworks, but as a requirement, I have to submit quarterly to a state framework. And I say to my team, this is an absolute joke. It makes no sense. It's a absolute rubber stamp. There's no merit. But I do this just to check a box. And I feel like whatever practice they put into place, they were missing an active CISO engagement, because it could be so much better and more valuable than me just checking. I check the box every quarter. I check the box.
Well, relevance has never stopped politicians from.
Exactly.
Can we jump a little bit into AI?
I was just gonna say, like, one of the mitigating controls or factors that I think a lot of modern CISOs are adopting is, like, maybe 10 years ago, you wouldn't have thought about, like, hey, I'm not gonna sign up for this without D&O insurance, for example, to really protect yourself. So I think, ISACs and other, networking events like this are critically important, because you're signing your kind of life away to those organizations. And I think a lot of times, you're under intense pressure from leadership, from others, to maybe, report as accurately as you would like. So I think, some of those measures to help your personal liability are really important as well.
Yeah, and increasingly you're required to sign your name and certify, right?
Exactly right.
jump a little bit into the AI arena here. So as it's becoming more integral to corporate operations, what approaches are you using to balance security and innovation? How are you managing like those risks between adopting AI and in areas that are sensitive, handling that risk?
I could speak from our lens. So phrase I actually have a lot of these phrases I like to use. So one is AI acceleration versus AI risk, and you have a development and a go-to-market, which is all acceleration, and then you have myself and my compliance team, which is this risk focus and where there's this weight, right? So, but for us, for us right now, it's technology. So we have spun up the AI committees, and we've partnered with our development teams to understand, because what's happening is you have these developers, these young developers who are fastly building on AI technologies. They don't fully understand, or nor did they, I was gonna say, they may not even know that they're supposed to understand what they're doing with these AI tools. So it's important that we've established relationships with our product development and our engineering teams early to understand what are these features, what is the data, where is it being stored, right to be forgotten, and all of this, all these capabilities. So for us, it's around getting closer to sort of that core of who's building these tools from the beginning, creating more awareness. And also for us too, someone mentioned something about all these AI tools that are coming into the environment. So while at one point we thought we only had, 100 SaaS apps in the environment, we invested in some new technology, and we found out there was over 300, sort of these apps that have come into the environment because people can just, go sign up for, free subscription, and they automatically do that handshake, that sort of acceptance of agreement, and they're sharing data. So now with technology, we now know what's in the environment. We can break those handshakes. So again, it's using technology, it's partnerships, but getting at it at the core.
I think that's one of the biggest risks. Early on, we saw like all these AI note takers pop up.
They're all popping up.
Show up on
Yeah.
meetings instead of
Yeah.
people were like, what is happening?
Yeah.
So we've had to take a pretty strict approach to block by default,
Yeah.
but
That
data leaving the building is.
Opt-in is my favorite term for SaaS tools with AI built into them, because it's like was non-existent until we started pushing back, right? I think the Slack case, you guys remember that from, was it earlier this year actually, right? Where they were harvesting data and not really telling everybody, and they opted all their customers into it without, really telling them. So now, again, my partners here in legal become my best friends, right? Because as we go through contract negotiation, right, we're very, very strict about now like getting language in there that allows us flexibility that someone just can't turn AI on in a tool that we already own, right, without our knowledge. And if it's harvesting data or if it's using it for training, right, like, so you've got to be diligent about now, right, both from a contract perspective and the technical perspective, right, protecting your organization, but at the same time, not hindering, right, innovation. I mean, at my company, it's a balance between, right, we build software products and then we consume software products, right? And so I got AI on both sides of the coin there. And that stakeholder group, right, of business folks and technology folks around the table at the same time is how we've dealt with that, right? So we have an AI governance board. We review everything that comes through, whether it's something we're building or it's something we're buying, right? And that way we're getting a perspective from our internal folks, our legal folks, our business folks, and trying to balance it out. It's not a perfect mechanism by any means, because at the same time, right, I've got developers who speed to market, right? They want to get, they want to go now, they want to run, right? And we're a little bit of a holdup there, but we're all still learning too at the same time, right? How to improve this. So.
With data, a number of you have mentioned this from a perspective point of view. Data is increasingly being transmitted through space-based systems like Starlink. Some of you have talked about regulation at a state level, at a national level, globally, etc. What are the most pressing issues in terms of jurisdictional or security concerns that you're encountering? In other words, I think the question is aimed at how do you navigate the complexities of venue, etc., and data governance?
Well, again, this is like Groundhog Day to me, because I'm old enough to remember when the internet came on and everybody said, oh my God, is cyberspace even regulated? And what we shockingly found out as we got into it is that every regulator assumed an asserted jurisdiction over cyberspace, right? Shockingly enough. And so I think what you have to do is you have to not assume that simply because you're dealing with some kind of satellite technology or something that transcends, different jurisdictions, that you are outside the scope of jurisdictional reach. I can assure you, I mean, we could have a wonderfully complex discussion about jurisdiction. There's jurisdiction to prescribe, meaning what does that law say it applies to? There's also, though, personal jurisdiction. Can you hail somebody into court and actually enforce this thing against them? There's enforcement of foreign judgments. In which case would they be able to come in the United States? And anyway, there's lots of layers to jurisdiction, but what you should just know is if I'm dealing with human beings or operations in a particular jurisdiction, I should assume that even if it's being delivered from a satellite or something, that I am in jurisdiction for purposes of whatever the law or concept is that comes out. Anything else in you? This is terrible, I don't know why I'm saying this. I had one guy when I was just at the law firm, he had this brilliant idea, which was he worked at a global bank. He said, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna take all the consumer data, we're gonna put it on a ship, and we're gonna keep that ship in international waters and be, navigating between among these laws. And I said, I'm sorry, but that's really not gonna help much. You're still gonna be stuck. All the regulators are gonna assert ownership. So there's no international ship solution for this thing.
That's interesting, because I'd automatically think that it's totally chaotic. What you're saying is that wherever you are, you can assume venue.
Yes.
Because you've been.
Or your people, or the consumers, or the patients, or whoever the people are, or the operations, the servers, the hardware, wherever that is, you should assume as a starting point that there's going to be jurisdiction attaching.
Well, and even like Microsoft tried that, right, with housing its data in Ireland and saying to the Department of Justice, like we can't comply with your legal process because all of this data is overseas in Europe, and that's the jurisdiction that we're subject to. And as we now know, in response to that, Congress passed the Cloud Act saying, like, if you're a U.S. provider, you've got to comply with, like, we have jurisdiction over you. It doesn't matter if you have your data on a boat or in Europe or in space. You have to.
Mike Asiencio, I did not introduce previously, but he's the acting director of cybersecurity policy here, and he's taken some questions from
We're taking
online.
questions online. We're gonna have Daniel read them since he's tracking them.
All right. So first up, we have, as AI and cybersecurity increasingly shape organizational landscapes, what critical roles do you believe HR should adopt in collaboration with security teams to protect and enable talent efficiently? I'll run through all of them, or?
No, this is a good
Okay,
one.
well, I a couple thoughts, and then others can chime in. One is a point that was raised earlier. I think the AI governance challenge is not just that there can be that handshake and a connection, but it's a people challenge in the sense of, people, business leaders may feel they can just go out and procure this, that, or the other thing, or I've had so many cyber incidents, or just, somebody at their desk thought, oh, you know what, there's this tool that's available on this site. I'm gonna not worry about the fact that it's hosted out of some Lithuanian land. Anyway, I'm gonna put all our data up in it, and it's gonna do this great thing and save me a bunch of time, right? So there's a governance challenge that goes along with it. On the flip side, it's HR's own use of AI that I think can very fast get you into trouble from a legal perspective. Well, this is a great tool. It's going to sift all the CVs for us, and then we're just going to know which CVs we have to look at the top. And okay, well, there's a whole bunch of rules around, privacy rules around making decisions about people in an automated way without human review. So there's a lot of ways that HR can partner in here and be aware.
New York has a statute,
Yes.
right, that specifies AI that's used in employment specifically has to be audited around bias and things like that.
I mean, in addition to that, there is a big challenge in terms of hiring tech.
Yeah.
A lot of HR professionals don't understand the technology landscape well enough, just in the screening process to allow talent to move, into the divisions for further review. Mark Montgomery, who was the executive director of the Cyberspace Solarium Commission stood up under Obama. We had sort of two versions of it. He went around the country asking organizations essentially that question: what was the biggest challenge you're facing in the cyber landscape? And the thing that seemed to fester up almost immediately was hiring managers had no idea what they were hiring. They did not understand the certification landscape versus the degree landscape. FIU had some issues too. I mean, we were one of the first to come out with an Internet of Things degree. No one knew where an Internet of Things degree mapped. And so they were getting overlooked in places like NSA. You would think that's a great place for someone who has expertise in Internet of Things. And so there has been a challenge, and I'm seeing now universities, particularly their College of Business and their human resource programs, doing more to condition hiring managers to understand the tech landscape better. And that's not a tool usage issue. That's a, how do we map talent to, the tech workforce in our organization?
This is an interesting question that also came in from somebody in the audience. Knowing what you know now, what career path in cyber would you pursue if you were starting today? So this, I guess, could be from a legal perspective or from some other perspective.
I mean, for me, it's GRC. It's like I'm watching it right now. This demand on individuals that are skilled in the art of understanding and managing these security programs. Like for us, our company is essentially just trying to keep up with all the regulatory. I have to run a SOC program. I have HIPAA. I have FedRAMP. I have DISA.
Oh, gosh.
State RAMP.
Let's start with the first acronym, by the way. GRC means what?
Governance risk compliance.
Okay, and just for those who may not know, SOC?
So, was it security operating controls or
Security Operations Center and
Operations
CISO.
Center, yeah. They're frameworks essentially of regulation and rules and controls that are used to sort of, you could be audited, you could do self-attestation where you could just raise your hand, but it's, anywhere from, 80 controls from like your passwords need to be this long to some of these frameworks are over 300 to 400 controls that you have to do things daily, monthly, weekly. And
So if you were coming into the field now, new, based on everything you know, you'd be focused on GRC.
I'd be focused on supporting GRC practices, and I feel like especially now in the space of AI and there's a lot of technologies that are sort of being impacted, but I look at this one as just accelerating because all these frameworks are popping up left and right. Every state's coming up with a framework, and we have to keep track of different states and their reporting strategies. So, and there's a lot of AI companies and new startup companies that are spinning up right now, building these governance, risk, compliance, automation tools, and they're raising a lot of capital because they're new in that space and they're helping sort of this manual method of madness to automation.
What about from a legal point of view? Where would you start in this AI cyber landscape, knowing what you know, if you were to start?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I teach a law school class on cybercrime, and I'm always saying to the students, I'm kind of envious of the opportunities that exist in this space now. I mean, this was not a field when I was in law school, and I kind of came into it sort of organically. Like I come from a liberal arts background, not a technical one. But I think supporting, people like our co-panelists, whether it's in-house or as outside counsel or in some other capacity, is such a cool opportunity because it is increasingly a partnership between security and legal that's just kind of started. It's sort of very nascent right now, I think. And I guess I also, since you asked, should give a plug for working for the government in this capacity as well. I think for me, that was an incredible opportunity. And so if you're an undergrad student, a law student thinking about a career in cyber, I think the opportunity to work in a government agency, as Brian and I both did, just gives you an incredible vantage point and kind of level of discretion that hones your skills in a way that you don't find anywhere else. So those are the two things I would say.
It's really interesting having somebody say, the opportunity is, and the government job to start with. I mean, a lot of people wouldn't think, it's such a fast-moving landscape that's a little counterintuitive, and yet what a great point. And I know a number of people in this space have started there. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm envious every time I hire a pen tester. So I think ethical hacking is probably the coolest and funnest thing to do. But I was never a coder, so you probably have to have a pretty good coding and scripting background there. But you have to understand everything from how to attack an operating system to an application, right? To a network. And so I think that it's a very broad view, but you can go deep in some areas. It usually takes a team, right, to do a really good pen test. But man, is it fun? Or at least it looks like it's fun.
I would say a close second is in the Security Operations Center as an analyst, because there's so many of these things that you can't like necessarily put your hands on, and I feel like a defender in the SOC in the Security Operations Center is the closest you'll get to seeing these threats actually manifest themselves. You know, you hear about hackers and nation states and all that. I think the SOC analysts get to really experience that and be on the front line. So I think that's a great place to start.
So just for clarity, I'm not a CISO. I'm wedged between CISOs here, but I'm not a CISO. I'm not a lawyer either. I'm in the political sciences, which is a little unique. I guess where I would probably go, I mean, I would double down on AI. I mean, the next 10,000 startups are going to be AI companies that are sort of moving, you know, that technology into every single vertical out there. And I just think that's the exponential space right now. If not there, I'd go to international tech law. I'm just kidding.
You know, the only
Sorry, bro.
that's all right. No, the pretty cool. But the only thing I would say is almost whatever entry point you have, I'd say just be nimble, paying attention, keeping your eyes open to opportunities, and just kind of follow it around. You know, so because there'll be great opportunities.
International tech law based out of Europe or
No, I said I was joking, but I wasn't joking. I mean, that's an incredible space right now.
Yeah.
And the demand there is going to be, I mean, it's going to continue to be exponential. I mean, hugely impactful.
So on you know, coming back a little bit on the AI topic, what excites you most or frightens you most about the prospects of AI? Excites you or frightens you, keeps you up at night or wakes you up in the morning like,
I mean, I think the efficiencies that AI is going to generate. I mean, everyone talks about, you know, machines taking over and displacing our species, right? I don't. That's not my outlook of AI. There are so many things that AI is going to do to sort of just transform quality of life in every single facet, and I'm really excited about that. And I think as we continue to embrace it, we're going to have to navigate this tectonic shift in the landscape from a legal perspective, from an ethical perspective, from a security perspective. But the opportunities incredibly outweigh, I think, the downside to this rapidly evolving technology landscape.
I would agree. I mean, I'm a CISO, so I'm a risk manager, so it's always, you know, what's the worst case scenario that's going to happen here? We have to think about that. But just seeing in such a short period of time what generative AI has done to change, right, how we function every day, right? How many people are not asking ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot something? I mean, come on. But I actually think that predictive AI holds even a greater capability for us, right? And predictive AI has been around for a long time, like all AI has been, but I think with the increases in our compute power, especially with things like quantum computing starting to become a little bit more mainstream, if we can harness that, I think predictive AI can drastically change the way companies operate, the way healthcare operates, the way we build things here. I mean, it's pretty.
The sheer amount of data that's making predictive AI possible is awesome.
so nobody's frightened?
Well, I won't
So
say.
lawyers are friends.
I'll answer it maybe in a different way. I'm not sure if I should be excited that I'm closer to retirement or that I'm gonna miss what's ahead of us. So I'm a little bit in between. It is hard to keep up, like as you know, as practicing IT and technology leaders, it's moving so quick, and we have these responsibilities to, you know, again, advance and accelerate our company, also manage risk, and also consume them ourselves. Like our company, I've watched from a generative perspective, like massive amounts of productivity, and we're only talking, you know, what is less than 12 months here. I mean, some of these tools haven't been available mainstream, like Copilot, to be licensed for more than 6 months. I mean, we're in the like day zero of this.
What I'll say is an area where I'm excited about it is I keep telling everybody on our global team it's making us into super lawyers because we are developing internally. I'm a big believer in sort of incremental change. Global cyber notice tool, so we can plug into our playbook effectuated through generative AI. You got an insight, I'm on a phone, I got these data fields, these jurisdictions. Yeah, here's boom, your list of where we think you might have 72-hour notice, 6-hour notice, 1-hour notice, whatever it is, so that you can do a roadmap quickly. So it's making us into super lawyers, basically. I'm excited about that. but it's very controlled. It's not a SaaS product, that sort of thing that anybody can dial into. It's for us. So those are the things that excite me about it. It's a little bit at the outer edges for me to be afraid of it just yet, because I just don't think that's not where
We have about 10 minutes left, and we have another question online. We can go to that one and probably.
Yep, and then I'll wrap up with one last question here.
Alrighty. Jumping off of the last question that was about interesting entry points, what are some effective strategies for career changers to quickly advance and specialize within cybersecurity and AI?
Isn't that an easy one? Isn't that right here?
I mean, it's a great point. I mean, it's find opportunities like that, right? Like, how can you accelerate your learning, whether it's through AI or otherwise, and get practical experience, right? I know that's probably that's harder than it sounds, right? But if you can get in an internship program, whether it's paid or not, it's nice if it's paid. But when I was in defense contracting, that is how we built our pipelines into cyber and into IT. Because it was incredibly hard to hire in the market, and it's not going to get any better. So you guys are perfectly situated here, right? I mean, this market is still in a negative employment curve. I've been saying that for like 5 years now, and so we, our feeder systems like what FIU is doing, and what other organizations are doing across the country are helping, but there's no light at the end of the tunnel yet for this, right? And as a hiring manager, I see it every day. I just hired a cloud security engineer. It took me 8 months to find him. 8 months here in the US. I'm trying to hire somebody in Europe, and I can't find anybody. Like, I mean, the resumes I'm getting aren't even close, right? And so, it's all about, right? Like, just find a way to get some experience. Reach out to folks, find a mentor. I help to mentor people all the time because I think it's fun, and if I can share mistakes that I made, maybe you guys don't make them, then that's beneficial. So
I saw a really interesting of a colleague of mine who's in the cyberspace, and to speak about what Mike said, it was a student reached out, must have doing blanket notes to different security individuals and offered themselves. They're a recent graduate, I think it was might have been a school in this area, and offered themselves up as a non-paid intern. And my colleague, he took that call. Now he is going to onboard this individual. So to Mike's point, here's someone that was reached proactively, students proactively reaching out to security professionals and offering up to be a, non-paid intern, and you might get grabbed. And then once you get in, you get 2-3 months of great experience, like hands-on experience. And then from there, you have great references and maybe even the ability to translate that into full-time work. I thought it was a creative idea.
And there are a lot of zero to hero programs out there. I mean, Fusion Cyber has the best one. Can I say that? Is that fair? Are we on the record? The Fusion Cyber FIU one is even better, I think. No, but I mean, there are a lot of these zero to hero programs that will take you with limited knowledge and build your competencies over an 8-month period. I think those are great, but you still need experience. You still need an in order to start to build the portfolio to gain the trust, or you're going to have to settle for unpaid internships, for example, which may not be easy for a mid-career professional that's looking to make a change. And so those pathways can be really challenging, but you do need the experience. Mentorship is also really key, because those mentors could bring you into organizations, maybe not theirs, but organizations, just based on the fact that they've tested your mettle a little bit, and they're willing to make a recommendation for you to get you a start. But I mean, again, it's a contact sport, so you got to get out there and do everything you can.
Great advice. Is there a student in the room here tonight? Because we've been taking some questions from online, but is there a student here in the room that has a question that they'd like to bring to the panel? Yes.
Hi, I'm Kiara. I'm a 2L at Howard Law. I wanted to know, attorneys, liability perspective of AI. I know recently there was a case, not a case yet, but I'm sure it's going to be a case soon, but a situation where a kid had a conversation with a chatbot and led to his suicide. And I'm curious to know, what does liability look like in those areas, and how are you guys preparing for situations like that?
It's a really good question. I mean, that's obviously the worst example you could kind of possibly think of, right? I mean, there's that one lawsuit involving, I think it was Air Canada, right? A much less serious outcome, but there was a customer service chatbot that gave a customer inaccurate information about her ability to like refund.
Get a refund,
Get
yes.
a refund, right?
Yes.
And I think the court said, like, you, Air Canada, are liable for that, right? Like, you adopted this
You
technology.
have to give her the
and
refund.
you have to
Your
give her the
chatbot
refund.
said it would give the refund,
Right,
so you have to give the
exactly.
refund, yes.
So I think generally, like, that's what we can expect to see. Like, courts are not going to tolerate an argument of like, well, the chatbot did what it did. Like, you have to have ownership of those decisions.
Yeah, the other one that comes to mind was I think what you have to be ready for is if you're using an AI algorithm in your business, if you do things wrong in terms of capturing a bunch of biometric data or other things without the right kind of consents, you should be expecting that you may get as an outcome either from the Federal Trade Commission or otherwise algorithmic disgorgement, meaning you have to kill the algorithm that you created. So there can be some real impact, not just a fine, but some real impact. The scenario you just said there, I think, is a very tough one. We'd have to really give that some thought as to there is some Section 230 immunity that certain intermediaries have, which has been under review for revising it for content that comes out. So that may be relevant, but that's a truly difficult. That's a huge societal issue that I think we have. I have a 14-year-old, who doesn't really like to talk to me anymore, if I can say that out loud. He's a full-blown teenager anyway. But anyways, I worry about what's happening to him on his phone, stuff like that. So I think that's a huge societal issue we have for sure.
And I think you see government agencies are now out there saying this is a huge enforcement priority for us, right? Like, they're very mindful of the risks, and I think we'll be aggressive.
It's a great question.
Yep, excellent question. Thank you. Last question, and this has come from many sources, but what I just scribbled down is, what do you say, some have called it the elephant in the room tonight, what do you say to people who argue that AI will displace cybersecurity job opportunity?
I'd say no. I think that AI is going to make a lot of challenging jobs in cybersecurity easier, right? The SOC example is perfect, right? I mean, it's the upside down funnel of a million things that turn into an incident that has to be investigated, right? But we're already in an employment shortage. So, I don't see cybersecurity jobs being displaced. In fact, I see them shifting, right? And opportunities coming because of AI, right? When I said we're still learning, I mean, has anybody figured out how to perfectly protect their organization against AI up here? No. So we're going to rely on, right? The next group of folks who are coming in to help, right? Help teach us, right? The generations that didn't grow up with AI is right in the back of our pockets, right? Every day. So companies like mine will be looking for that, right? I mean, we can't hire enough developers. I can't hire enough cyber people. I don't think, in 5-10 years that we're going to see that shift.
I would say it goes back.
I remember my chief technology officer once telling me that there was a way when I said, how can we make sure that we're safe in this? He said, just shut it down, close it down.
Disconnect from the internet.
Yes.
Go work in a skiff.
Yes.
I think it's the theme. 30 seconds. I think it's the theme of the super lawyer from a law firm perspective, because I do think it will eat up some of the lower tasks, but the actual driver still has to be a human. There's no way, so there you go.
I mean, there's still 500, 600,000 vacant cybersecurity jobs across the country. If you look at cyberseek.org, I mean, so a dent in that could be done by AI. I mean, there's 3 ways that AI-human interaction is going to evolve. It's going to be, machine as subordinate, right? It's doing the things that you tell it to do. It's machine as co-pilot. It's working alongside you. And then it's machine as manager. It's guiding the decisions and the behaviors that you shape. And at the end of the day, I think the focus is on that, how human-machine interaction is going to evolve in the cyber place. It's not going to displace it. I think it's going to supplement it in really profound ways and hopefully get us a little bit closer to, eroding that delta between the number of vacant tech jobs out there that is going to continue to grow, by the way. And it continues to outpace our ability to move people into the workforce. And so I think that's sort of how it's going to reconcile.
Great ending statement. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, everybody. Can we give a round of applause to
We also do have our VP who runs FIU DC to help us also say just a little bit about what we do out here.
No, first up, I want to thank our panel, and as important as our panel, thank you all for giving your time to meet with our leaders here in the space. I see Howard students here. I'm excited that we have some student leaders visiting from FIU. I do want to give thanks to Baker McKenzie. I know we have some virtual partners on the line, like Denmark Technical College. Special shout out to Cisco. I think when you look at putting your money where your mouth is, and when you look at the future and the professionalization of this space, on behalf of FIU for sure, but on behalf of all of higher education. To respond to Mr. Asensio's question, and hopefully you have a chance on the way out on the first floor. We were wrapping up the first day of a climate technologies fly-in. One of our verticals is giving our students access to great discussions like this. So thank you again for making that happen. But this was a kickoff. I'll put one of them on the spot to explain what's going to happen in the next 3 days. But hopefully on the way out, you can experience our center, our hub, which is yours, as well as this fourth floor space. But on any given year, we're excited about being able to partner with key friends. And I know you and your team was here for most of the day. And we're also here to advocate for our key researchers, our research initiatives as cyber. FIU is one of those major initiatives that crosses many disciplines at the university, many colleges. I want to give a shout out to the Gordon Institute, Brian and Miguel and the rest of the team that help really drive what we do here in Washington, because although we're based 1,000 miles away, it's because of relationships that Brian and team help maintain and manage, and new partnerships that we're able to do that. So if I may, one of our students, can I put one of you on the spot? India, maybe? As far as what you're up here for the next 3 days?
Hello, everyone. So I'm from FIU. I'm a computer science major, and currently I'm here to explore DC and go to various federal agencies. Today we went to the Department of Commerce, and we were just learning about climate tech and how we can advocate for it. So FIU actually has research in carbon and how to reduce the carbon emissions in concrete. So yeah, we're just exploring and advocating for our future.
South Florida was designated, to jump off of what India was mentioning. FIU is one university leading on this infrastructure and concrete research, but along with FAU, the University of Miami, Miami-Dade County, Broward County, Palm Beach. It's a whole coalition of about 40 partners. We're designated by the Department of Commerce for a climate technologies hub. And this summer, 12 of these regions, 31 regions were designated, 12 were actually funded, and South Florida was one of them. And FIU is helping drive a lot of the research that India just referenced. So once again, I want to thank all of our partners. I want to thank the Gordon Institute. And please, on the way out, if you'd like to pass through our center, we welcome you to take a peek.
Yes, just one closing. Thank you, Carlos. We can get drinks and go up to the rooftop too as well, right? Is that
That's up to my call.
Okay. All right. Just one last word. Some of us have met in our lives people who are force of nature people. There are a number of those folks in this room tonight. One of them is Scott McGregor from Cisco, who's been called out on many occasions. He runs the social impact, in particular, social justice action initiative at Cisco. And while he couldn't be here tonight, working alongside of him, as many of us in this room has inspired us to do the kinds of things that you're hearing about tonight, engaging new people in the talent pipeline. And Scott has, for the first time in honor of this gathering tonight, announced 10 $10,000 scholarships for students going into a SOC internship program at Denmark Technical College, which is in, I believe, the poorest county in America. And so that work and the life that's happening in that community as a consequence of that SOC now gone operational, thanks to fusion centers and your leadership, Chris, is a really exciting thing, and Scott's making that happen literally effective tonight. So with that being said, I just again want to thank all of you, those of you who've been listening, those of you who've been presenting, for coming, being part of this inaugural CISO Roundtable event. We're anticipating that this will become a regular event that is hosted different institutions all around the country. So thank you for being here. And there's lots of food, and there are lots of beverages, and there are lots of basketballs. My old college roomie, Brian Whistler, will be back there signing them if you'd like that. So please help yourself to all those things. Thanks again.